In reading these lectionary passages this week, I'm not sure if it's probably not original with me, but I kept coming back to a statement that I was, if you all have ever been to the zoo and watched the monkeys flying around in their little trapeze things and so forth, that's kind of what it looks like whenever I'm kind of reading and ruminating over passages that might make sense in a message, and this particular sentence kept coming up after reading these because it was just kind of coming from everywhere, and it's kind of hard to describe, and I'll stop there because some of you are wondering what in the world I'm talking about. But this I'll call it a quote. You can give me credit for it if it catches on. But your life is a loan from God, and the gifts that we give others are payments for that loan and are due every day. There's not a person in here likely that, or watching online even, that has not at some point in their life taken out a loan and or loaned something to someone else. Most, if not all of us, have been given credit by someone or some entity and or extended credit to someone or some entity. The largest loan ever given, which if you were a part of this, I'd like to talk to you after the service, but the largest loan ever given in history was $17.5 billion, and that was a loan to the nation of Saudi Arabia by this big consortium of banks. And there's been some other, menial loans along those lines, 10 billion, 11 billion, since then. That was in 2016. And to say that there's a lot of money out on loan is an understatement. The International Monetary Fund shows that there are about $250 billion that are out on loan to other countries. Interesting. Loans. I mean, we know them. We're aware of them. How did it start? We don't, we've just always been a part of who we are, loans and credit and those kind of things. Historians say that the concept of credit and loans was really created primarily by the Knights Templar. That French order of soldiers that were commissioned by the Catholic Church. In researching this, I found out that the Knights Templar, which is what we know them as, do you know they had another name? They were officially called the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. You can figure out pretty quickly why they wanted to shorten that into just Knights Templar. But they were the very popular military order, and because they were stationed in different places, they provided security for pilgrims going to and from Jerusalem. And they established a system of banks, if you will, where if you were on your way, you didn't have to carry all of your goods and your money. You could leave it at one of their places and then carry with you a note and pick it up whenever you left there on the other side of Jerusalem. It was an interesting system, and it worked. And that's really the beginning of the banking system as we know it. And those notes, those loans, could be redeemed at other Templar houses. It was a safe way to go to and from with large amounts of money or even small amounts of money. Certainly a lot more convenient than carrying around bags of gold or other valuables. But that concept of loan and loans is really much older, as evidenced in our reading from 1 Samuel. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord repay you with children by this woman for the loan she has made to the Lord." Eli calls Samuel the loan that Hannah made to the Lord. Interesting. And what does that mean? You probably recall Hannah's prayer from 1 Samuel chapter 1. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. Verse 11 in chapter 1, and she made a vow, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor shall ever be used on his head." Now, to be fair, backing up to Eli's words in verse 20, some translations, and you may have read this, render that word loan or that phrase as gift or even asked of, as in, "May the Lord repay you with children by this woman for the son she asked for from the Lord," or the gift given to her by the Lord. But I like the loan translation, really along with the gift that was asked for. In fact, if you'll allow me a little interpretive leeway on Eli's statement, and we're not voting on that, I'm just telling you I'm going to. I would render the verse something like this. May the Lord give you a gift of more children by this woman for the unselfish commitment she made to give up or loan the son she asked of the Lord. In old Eli's mind, Samuel, the boy Samuel, was a gift and a loan that God had given to Hannah and to Elkanah, and that she had in turn loaned back or gifted to God for God's use. And in Hannah's mind, although she had kept her into the agreement and given him to God, Samuel was still her son. And every year, she and Elkanah would come back to the temple and offer their yearly sacrifices and to give Samuel a new robe. It's even called a little robe. Obviously, he was young and growing, probably outgrowing one every year. She and Elkanah had 5 other children after Samuel, and there was certainly evidence that God had blessed her obedience and faith in her life. Samuel had been given to the Lord, but he was still Hannah's son. Gifts and loans. As I've looked at this week's lessons and thought about the Christmas season and Advent in these past few weeks, I began to consider the gifts and loans that we've been given. And I imagine every one of us could recall special Christmas gifts that we've been given over the years, some because of how memorable or meaningful they are, others because of how ridiculous they might have been at the time. And maybe you received a special gift this Christmas. Maybe it was I don't mean to be too stereotypical here, but a power tool that you've had your eyes on, that cordless leaf blower, or whatever. Maybe a book that you've been wanting to read and just hadn't pulled the trigger on getting it and you got it, or some appliance that will make your life maybe slightly easier, or maybe some other thing that you really wanted or needed. Or maybe your family does what our children started doing several years ago. Some folks call it a white elephant exchange, but there's no gag gifts in what our kids do, but real gifts that are a certain dollar level, limit, but they're exchanged and then traded. And when you consider among our kids how many of them there are, I don't know how many for sure, but there are a lot. It becomes pretty fun to see them all doing that. And Jackie and I are not involved. We just get to watch them having fun together. And that, looking at that and thinking about it, that's a real gift to us, just watching that happen. Getting to be with those we love, that's the gift. Maybe it's that way for you too. Hannah loved her son Samuel, and she made sure that every year he got a new robe. But along with that robe was a reminder that he had a family that loved and supported him. And maybe that's what you all have been doing. Maybe that's what all of us have been doing over the last few weeks. Recognizing that as we move through this season of Advent, that as we've celebrated hope and peace and joy and love, I hope it's also been an opportunity to recognize that in the coming of Christ into our world, we've received the ultimate gift, the gift of salvation, along with the gifts of God's other children, those sons and daughters and moms and dads and grandparents and aunts and uncles and dear friends and others that are just incredible gifts from God that become our salvation oftentimes on a daily basis because we need them. I've been very blessed these past few weeks to see all my children and other family members not related by literal blood and ancestry, but by our mutual faith in Christ and in God's kingdom. And I've been very fortunate, as you have, I'm sure, to hug every one of them and hope and pray that they would experience that hope and peace and joy and love, the love of God during this season. Unlike Hannah, skipping forward a few centuries, Hannah had a pretty good understanding of what she was giving up and what she was loaning. and what this gift to her meant as she gave it back to God in Samuel. But unlike Hannah, Mary, the mother of Jesus, probably didn't quite understand all of her commitment when she said, I am the Lord's servant, may your word to me be fulfilled. It's probably still a mystery to her in many ways. And as she and Joseph searched for and eventually found their son after the trip to Jerusalem for the Passover, more understanding was coming. And she gave each of us a word of wisdom by her example of treasuring and pondering all those things in her heart. Well, we're about to wrap up another year. 2024 is almost behind us. Something new is coming. You can count on it. And as we approach 2025, let's don't let the season of Advent and Christmas be the only time that we consider the loans and gifts that we've been given and the opportunities that we have for payment. Knowing that in Christ, ultimately, all of our debts are paid. I think both Hannah and Mary would tell us, and I've changed the quote a little bit, our lives and the lives of those we love are both a loan and a gift from God. The gifts we give others are payments for that loan, and we have the privilege of making those payments every day. Like Mary, may we ponder in the days ahead and treasure those truths in our hearts. Thanks be to God.